Howdy, howdy. We are live on another Friday night. First time in a while. Dave and I have taken a couple of weeks off, but yeah, we're happy to be back.
That's right. Sohail, I see in the comments says greetings from Risa. We should have gone there, Father.
Yeah. Instead I was busy trying to refit the Starship Texas. We're trying to fancy up our content a little bit, but yeah, I'll talk about that. I'm glad we have some returning customers already live in the audience, so people didn't forget about us after 2 weeks. So
Hey, I see Jill.
and Joel and there with Sohel. Yeah, let's just go ahead and get the show started. I'm Fathery,
This is Dave.
and this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 241st installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek, old and new. And tonight we're talking about the Star Trek Deep Space Nine documentary, What We Left Behind. So, as many of y'all might know, Dave just completed his first watch ever of DS9. He did season 6 and 7 earlier this year.
Yeah, and this is like the ultimate kind of epilogue thing. Not many series have a ready and waiting for one epilogue. But if you wait to watch it until such a documentary has been made, then you're like I
Yeah.
did. Then it's a big win.
Well, you had like this huge like multi-course meal, and then this is like a good like a good little dessert to go with
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it was very nostalgic, and it was just cool to see the actors and writers as they are. When was it made, Fathery? I know we'll get into a
It
quick
was
bit of
it
history.
was made over the course of several years. In fact, it was a little frustrating for the eager fans who've been backing this project and ready to see it, but it eventually came out in the spring of 2019. But
2019.
I think it had like a premiere in the fall of 2018 in New York, or
Mm-hmm.
I think they did one in New York and one in LA. But yeah, it was like actually like released like to the public. Like you could buy it on disc. It's available to like rent on YouTube. I think sometimes it shows up on streaming platforms, perhaps depending on what region you're in. But yeah, 2019. So which is a few years ago. So it was interesting for me to revisit it now. It's something I kind of watch like at least once a year, but just kind of reevaluate it a few years later. So I think we're gonna have a lot of fun discussing this from two
Mm-hmm.
different perspectives. Like that was our whole thing with DS9. You watching it for the first time, and me watching that show for the 47th time.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, before we talk about this documentary, though, a couple things I need to say. First and foremost, the most important thing is I got to say thank you to our very generous Patreon supporters out there. Y'all make the content we do possible. So thank you, Starfleet, Sohel, Cake is Eternal, Crazy Dutchy, Joanne Robertson, John Dog, Geek Filter, Earl Grey Truckee, Quark Spar, Benjinium, Stephanie Durantes, Matthew Averett, and our anonymous supporters. To show you our appreciation, Dave and I will be having our monthly watch party we do for the patrons tomorrow. If you're checking us out live on Friday, it's tomorrow. Otherwise, if you're listening to this later, you missed it. But yes, tomorrow, Saturday, May 20th. It's a special watch party. It's actually Geek Filter, aka Aaron. It's his birthday today. We're celebrating it tomorrow with the watch
Just
party.
his
Uh,
birthday weekend.
yeah, it's his birthday weekend. He wanted to do the two-part episodes of Future's End from Star Trek Voyager Season 3. where the Voyager crew go back in time to 1996 Los Angeles and meet Sarah Silverman among some other 20th century people. So that'll be a fun double feature, and we do something like that every month. So yeah, you can come into the Patreon as little as $2 a month. If you want to be more generous, there's additional perks as well if you want to come in at a higher tier. But yeah, that'll get you into the monthly watch parties. And what's open to the public, though, is our Discord server, where we have a lot of fun conversations. I was posting some news for Star Trek: Strange New World season 2. I got something in the Discord server that might interest people if you want to see some footage that wasn't released everywhere in the world, but was released somewhere on a TV spot. So yeah, go to the Discord server, check that out. Links to Patreon and Discord in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this. But okay, done with the housekeeping stuff. I guess there's a little bit of news going on, Dave, with the speaking of Strange New Worlds. We have the WGA writer's strike going on, has stopped production on
Right.
season 3.
Right. Rightfully so.
Yeah, no, it's the right call. I'm glad to see that. In fact, I saw today our friend Larry Nemechek was live on YouTube from the Paramount Gates, the picket line, and it was cool to see. There were a lot of cars honking, showing solidarity. A lot of riders there, and it was cool. Like he was just talking about like, oh, I just saw Henry Alonso Meyer from Strange New Worlds, and he was talking to one of the guys from Enterprise because they worked together on Ugly Betty, and as they're having that conversation, Ira Stephen Bear, who we will talk a lot about tonight, walks past Larry Nemechek in the background. And Larry is like, "Oh, what the hell? Look, there's Ira." And then Ira kind of like waved at Larry as he kept walking. So, yeah, it was cool to see that like the Star Trek writers out there on the picket lines. It's really cool to see that.
I think I saw, and I'm sure there's lots of people participating, but I believe I saw Jerry Ryan also from posting on her page that she was on the picket line today.
Yeah, that's cool. So, yeah, I don't know. I was already kind of worried about Strange New Worlds coming out in May again, like it did last year, or like this year I guess it got pushed back to June. And but like next year, I was like, oh man, are we even gonna get it in like June of next year? And then now with like this delay, like now that they're not shooting, it's like, well, it doesn't look like it. So
yeah, I'm a pretty patient soul, and I definitely prioritize their the living standards of the creatives over my entertainment, but only just no no
I mean,
but it's still it can still hurt to have to wait on that.
The ways that it's really affecting Star Trek right now is that there's not going to be any production on Strange New World season 3 just yet. The animated shows are fine. They're a different union, so they're still fine to we're still
right.
going to get Lower Decks, we're still going to get Prodigy. They're going to be unaffected. The Discovery stuff, they're going to shoot some new stuff for Discovery season 5, the final season. That's done. They're finished, is what I'm hearing. Like they did that, they shot that, it's done. So Discovery, perfectly fine to go. We'll still get that final season early next year. I'm thinking January or February. The other two things that I think are going to be really impacted right now, the Section 31 movie. I don't know if they had a script ready to go for that or not. I know something that had been in the works for a while, but I know that there was a lot of recent rewrite activity going on. And that's something they really need to get into production in the fall, because that's Michelle Yeoh is so busy. After the fall, she's going to be busy with the jobs she booked when she was nominated for the Academy Award. Not even like the new jobs that she's going to get now that she's an award winner. So so I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. It's like, oh, we're finally going to get the Section 31 thing with Michelle Yeoh after all these years. It's like, well, actually, maybe not. I don't know. So if they got her booked for, the fall, like I think that they still have to pay her. So I don't know what's going to happen there. That one's going to be interesting. So keep an eye on that one. And then of course the Starfleet Academy show, they were aiming for, I think, 2025. So it wasn't even going to go into production until probably sometime next year. But yeah, that development is going to be halted because that's, they're still in the writing phase of that show.
Am I right, Father, that there's been about two major strikes in the last 20, 30 years, something like that?
The last one was 07, 08.
Prior
It's
to
like
that,
in
what, the 80s?
there no, I think was there like a brief one in like 92 maybe.
Yeah.
There's one in 88 that impacted TNG season 2. That's why we got a shorter season for season. It was only 22 instead of 26. And then one of those was a clip show with Shades of Grey.
Right.
So it was like barely 22. But yeah, the last one was 07. I think it was actually January of 08. No, it might have started in December. It might have been before Christmas of 07. But that one was like 3 months. So it went over 100 days, I believe, which
Yeah,
is that's a
I
long
believe
time.
that's correct. And hopefully the studios will capitulate to demands well before that this time. But it's got to be what it's got to be.
Well, in the meantime, there's some really like wonderful Star Trek comics to read if we do get a delay in some of these TV shows. I just started reading some of the comics. The main ongoing series right now. I'm behind. I'm only 4 issues in, but I loved it, and I recommend people go check out some of the Star Trek. If there are people interested in Star Trek comics, let us know, because we've tried to do content talking about those before, and it's something like Dave and I are both like really passionate about comics. Like he's worked in a comic book retail side of things for
Couple decades.
for was it like the majority of your life at this point?
Um, no,
But a good bit.
but pretty close. But pretty close. Yeah.
And I'm a devoted reader of comics, or at least I used to
Yeah.
be. It's hard. There's so much Star Trek now. I don't have time for my comics. But yeah, if people want to hear us talk about Star Trek comics, then
Yeah,
uh
one thing we could do is, because the format that IDW, who currently has the Trek license, takes is they do miniseries. For the most part, sometimes there's ongoing series, but the majority of things that will come out will probably be a miniseries that'll run 6 issues or so. And like if we ever wanted to, if there was an interest, we could like either cover them as they're coming out, or cover them, like when one or two of them, or two or three of them when they're collected, or it's but it's fun stuff. You were telling me, and Father Ray, this has some post Deep Space Nine stuff. You're going to
mhm.
see Deep Space Nine characters returning in this, and sort of find out their fates in the expanded universe, at least.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you're tuning into this show because the DS9 documentary talk brought you here, if you're an avid DS9er, then by all means check out the current Star Trek comic. Um, but yeah, I guess we shall transition to our main subject of the evening, which is that documentary, What We Left Behind. The story on that, Dave, you brought up earlier about when did it come out, and I was saying it was in development for a while.
Hmm.
I think it was actually announced at Star Trek Las Vegas 2016, which was it was a huge convention. I wasn't there. I almost went. This was right around the time we were starting. It was right before we started recording Tex-Trek. Uh, but it was the 50th anniversary of the franchise. So I think it was probably like the largest one they ever had, at least since they've been doing it at the Rio. And I believe that Ira at his DS9 panel there announced they were doing this documentary. He'd been approached to make a DS9 documentary. William Shatner. Remember, like William Shatner got really into like making documentaries. He made like a few Star Trek documentaries. He did like the Captain's one where like he hung out with like Patrick Stewart and Kate Mulgrew and Scott Bakula. Then he did like the TNG development one, a Chaos on the Bridge, about the craziness getting that show made, and all the other the insane drama there. That's a great story. Maybe we should talk about that doc at some point. Maybe we'll get
Yeah,
around to that.
so I wouldn't mind catching that.
But yeah, and William Shatner is like, okay, he was done. I guess he got bored doing these documentaries. But they're like, hey, we could get Ira Stephen Bear. We could get like the guy who was the showrunner on DS9. Maybe he would do a documentary for DS9. And they kind of created a monster because Ira got super passionate about this project, and and he wanted to make it something he loves to tell the story of how when he first started talking to Avery Brooks about doing this documentary, Avery Brooks insisted that it can't just be a bunch of interviews. You need to make it something, it needs to be something special and unique and kind of go the extra mile. And so in order to fund this thing, they were doing the crowdsourcing, is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Like the Indiegogo, I believe. And I backed it, immediately when I heard about it, because this is something that I was reminded rewatching this is like, DS9 was still kind of underappreciated, I think, in 2016.
Right.
Yeah, not so much now.
It's a thematic in the actual the documentary itself,
Mm-hmm.
talking about the kind of the highs, basically knowing that they were kind of underappreciated and how different, crew members and cast and crew reacted to it. Well, we'll get into it a little bit more, but yeah, they were aware of it for sure. They knew they were a little bit of the redheaded stepchild.
Well, the crazy thing though was I can't remember like what their goal was, but like they met their goal within 24 hours of posting it up on Indiegogo, and
Love to hear it.
and so they were like, wow. So they kept doing like more and more kind of fundraising, and they were coming up with like cool perks. I can't remember like what all I got. I got like a couple T-shirts. I got the Blu-ray. I got like this digital. I got early access to it on as a digital copy. But I wasn't doing it for the perks. I was doing it because I was passionate about this project too. And they ended up getting like, it was like over $500,000. It was like over 500K.
People finally came through for DS9.
Yeah. And so the really cool thing about that is like now they're working on a Voyager one, and I think it's nearly done. They showed a lot of footage of it on the Star Trek cruise just a couple months ago.
That's interesting. I like Voyager, but it is not Deep Space Nine's caliber, I think. But I'd definitely be interested in a documentary on it. There's obviously lots of interesting behind the scenes stuff, fireworks and salamander babies and stuff.
And the thing with that Voyager documentary though is because like people loved this so much, when when people finally saw the final project they were so impressed with this documentary that when they announced the Voyager one, people flocked to that, and they've already like they already put together like over $1 million.
Wow. Yeah.
So, but it's like that is so history repeating itself. It's like, man, like this so much of this franchise can stand on the shoulders of DS9.
Yeah. Yep, and I hate to say it, but I don't want to prejudge it, but it's not going to be as good as the Deep Space Nine one. In the comments, by the way, I see Jill pointed out we have covered the other, the Woman in Motion Star Trek documentary about Nichelle Nichols.
Oh yeah, we sure did.
So that was our documentary number 1 so far. Well,
it was about 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember like what number text. That's probably like one. I'm gonna say 137 or 8. I don't know, somewhere in that neighborhood. Go.
If you're off by more than 3, I'm sickened.
Hey, someone go look that up in the live audience and then tell me how close I am.
What was your guess? 137?
Yeah, we'll go with 137.
All right.
Dave, we should, I guess, talk about our reactions to this documentary. My reaction to it was I actually like originally like I watched like the digital copy they sent me, but then I watched it again, in the theater at our local movie theater, Tinseltown in Pflugerville. It's actually like I saw a lot. So I saw my first Star Trek movie I ever saw in the theater, First Contact there. Except it was when the theater was in like where the Ashley's furniture is now. But
yeah, I know what you're talking about. Nobody else does. But
no one else does. But well, there might be people from Pflugerville in here. But seeing it on the big screen, just like seeing like Deep Space Nine on the big screen was so cool. Seeing the HD footage they remastered was so cool. Seeing just like an audience who came to see like a Star Trek documentary. I mean, like it wasn't packed, but there were there were like 20 or 30 of us in there. That's kind of cool.
And not just a Trek documentary, but the documentary of like your favorite Trek.
Yes. And then seeing my name in the credits as being like one of the backers on the big screen, that was cool too. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun getting to see it in the theater. Dave, what was your reaction to seeing it just a couple nights ago?
I mean, I had a lot. I guess I'm going to say a lot of different reactions. Like, first of all, I'm not a big behind the scenes guy.
Uh-huh.
It's not like sometimes I like behind the scenes stuff. I do it sometimes. I'll watch Ready Room or whatever. But I do tend to be I want the cinematic magic to be so enveloping that I don't know that they reused the set or whatever. Um, so it was cool to just see. This is the most I've ever seen Ira Stephen Bear at length. You know, hadn't seen much of these cast and crew members talking before at length, without makeup, without outside of their uniforms and everything. So that was cool. I liked that. I got a big a nostalgic hug because it was revisiting this really amazing series. I didn't know that they were gonna. I guess I did know you had mentioned it, but it was seeing the writers' room that they put together, where they have a little fun pitching a hypothetical eighth season, and it runs throughout the whole documentary. It's supported by animatics, I think you'd call them. Is that right? Something
Yeah.
like that. Illustrations with some animation in it. Anyway,
There's been I've seen things called animation that had less motion than that. So.
yeah, and and then I was also struck that the documentary kind of the show reflects the themes, or the documentary reflects the themes of the show in a way. Deep Space Nine was this kind of scrappy underdog, that they um had to succeed against difficult odds, that you see that really that's how the show was made. And that even sometimes they had failures. They talk about Terry Farrell's departure.
Hmm.
Irish Stephen Bear kind of acknowledges that maybe they should have pushed harder on LGBT topics. And they acknowledge some bumps along the road, and that felt very Deep Space Nine. And then of course there's just super fun stuff like watching everybody bust Colm Meaney's balls about how whiny he was about putting on prosthetics one time, one episode. So I don't know. I had a really good time with it. It's a good mixture of both kind of heartfelt, funny, and just kind of nostalgic too. Obviously, I learned a lot of stuff. Highly recommended.
Cool. Well, I do need to point out that in our live audience, Joanne Robertson looked it up. Woman in Motion was Tex-Trek number 144. So I was off by 7, but that's pretty good.
Jesus Christ, Father.
Out of 241 shows, getting it off by 7 is pretty damn good.
I thought you were the prophet or the emissary. Now I have my doubts. But
No, I'm not the emissary.
I heard there was another emissary who was with much more orthodox upbringing.
Yeah,
So
I'm the pretender emissary.
Yeah, you're that guy. um, um, anyway, yeah, Father. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
And
What are your
Jill 47 is explaining that column sounds like column when said out loud. That comment makes more sense when you can read it. But yes, in Irish you pronounce that word column, not calm.
Oh, that's right. It's one of those things that I've seen a million times, but it's pretty rare that I guess I say the actor's name. So good catch, Jill. I'll see if I can get used to it. Call him Maney.
Yeah, column meanie.
Like everybody, it's funny because there's definitely like a good deal of him and O'Brien in him, however you want to do it, and he's kind of a little curmudgeonly, I think, but like not not in a really truly dour way, a little bit more fun. Curmudgeon.
It's funny seeing him. I've never seen him in real life. I've never seen him at a con. I hope so. Maybe someday. Doesn't do a ton, and he's a busy actor. And I'm not even sure where he lives. I don't know if he's. I assume he's in the States, but I don't know. Maybe he moved back to Ireland. I don't know, or maybe he goes over there sometimes. But he does, like, you were saying, there's a lot of O'Brien in him, or a lot of him and O'Brien. It's like, yeah, like his mannerisms don't really change much when he's playing O'Brien. I've seen him play other actors where he does get like a bit more he kind of shows a different posture, might speak a little differently. But yeah, he's when he talks as Colum in this documentary, he does seem like so much like O'Brien. But
Yeah.
then there's some other people. I remember like you pointing out when you saw Avery Brooks, and they chose like a couple clips where he's like I think where he's a bit more eccentric than normal. But I don't like Dave. Do you think you could do like an impression of Avery Brooks? Like
I don't
you
think
think you can impersonate that?
I can't remember what some of his lines are, but the behind, if you I assume you're talking about the scene where I Avery Brooks as Cisco presents this, a character that's, kind of a larger than life, somewhat Shakespearean, and very kind of classically, I'm going to say erudite. Well, and then Avery Brooks, though, apparently speaks in jazz bebop. I don't know, like sentence fragments. I don't even remember what some of the things he said were, or
But
I would take a shot at it because I like
it's
to imitate his voice.
it's funny like when some of the actors are talking about like being directed by him, and he would talk, he'd be like, "Yo, man, just glad, dig," like, uh,
Yeah,
but like the actors are like, it sounds weird, but like I would always understand what he meant by that. Like,
right.
oh,
In
like
fact, they were
okay,
making a point in the documentary about his skill as a director. That um, and it did sound like he spoke like a jazz musician. And that, but
watch the
yeah, it was.
Captain's documentary where you see like Shatner hanging out with them, and
Hmm.
and and just like Shatner, like just like the way that like they bounce off of each other, just like Shatner being kind of confused by Avery. It's just it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I need to see it. You showed me some clips from that. I need to
Yeah.
see that again. Yeah, one downside, I suppose, for this was that, from what you told me, and just what it appeared, is there weren't any truly, quite contemporary interviews with Avery Brooks
Yes.
for it. They used clips from lots of other interviews, which still gave you a good portrait of him, but there wasn't quite he wasn't on set hanging out with Ira and Nana and all the rest of them.
Yeah, and that's the elephant in the room, or Horta in the room, or whatever you want to call it, that we need to address. I thought you'd like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would.
yeah, Avery. There's been like a lot of talk about like Avery Brooks, about how, oh, has he like been blacklisted from Hollywood? Has he just chosen, not to work in Hollywood? Is he unhealthy? Is people? I think he got in trouble for like a DWI or something. People are like, oh, is he like a drug addict? Is he a drunk? Or like, is he sick or whatever? From what I've heard from people who see him, he was at one of the picket lines the other day in LA.
Hmm.
People like Iris says he talks to him. Sirach Lofton says he talks to him. They say he's fine, but I don't know what happened, but it's like his choice to be
He's not a
out of the
public
spotlight.
spotlight guy. Yeah, he's. But it seems like he is also not some like full on Howard Hughes recluse.
Yeah,
Hiding away behind the curtains. But yeah, it seems like you're not going to see him a ton.
on the Star Trek cruise in February, Ira talked about working on the documentary, and talked about I think someone had asked him, if he could talk about Avery Brooks not being in it, not having new footage in it. And
Hmm.
Ira said, we showed Avery what we were working on. He said he really approved of the final cut and everything. But yeah, he just didn't want to do any. He didn't want to be on camera, and we tried, and there is one point where I thought we were going to get him, and then I had a conversation with him where he was very angry, and at that point it's kind of like, okay, like he's clearly not going to do this, but he would never say like what his anger was, what his frustration was. He actually, I wrote it down because I wanted to make a note of it. I was like, I got to remember this verbatim. But Ira Stephen Bear said, the thing about Avery Brooks is that we all thought he was this big tough guy, but he's actually the most sensitive. He feels everything so strongly, so he has to keep his feelings guarded, because he'll have such strong reactions to things. And there is something going on there that made him make the choice, like, I'm done with y'all, I'm done with Hollywood. Y'all can't pay me enough to get back in front of a camera. I don't know what it is. I think the people like Ira or Sirach know, but yeah,
They're maybe being private about it.
It's a weird thing, but it is what it is. He didn't want to show up in front of the camera, but they talk about him so much, and there's old footage. There's that time where he's talking like that little girl at the convention. She says, what was your favorite mission in DS9? He says, my favorite mission was raising Jake.
Yeah, super heartwarming. It's honestly, it feels also like that's one of those cases where like that also felt like Cisco. He was Cisco right in that moment too.
Yeah.
But just as to go ahead and get into one of the incidents, something I learned in it, that Sarah Lofton talks about, that outside the show, and you told me about this some, Fathery, but like Avery Brooks kind of took him under his wing, it sounds like, and they would like go to ball games and stuff together. And he said he actually like introduced him as if he was his son, along with his biological son, who would be with them sometimes.
He'd say, "These are my boys. These are my sons."
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, everything I kind of learned about how he interacted with Surik suggests that it was really something special, and there's a reason why that father-son relationship is, I feel, pretty easily the best depicted in Star Trek's lore. Is because it was real, but honestly, I think even if it wasn't real, I think that those actors would have given it their all too. But it seems like it really, he was being real with it. And there's a kind of a little bit of a heartbreaking scene in the documentary too, where you were talking about how Avery Brooks really feels emotions on a very deep level, where they talk about that, one of the most famous episodes of them all. Father, remind me of the name.
Far Beyond. No, that's the animated series one is Far Beyond the Stars. The DS9 one is Beyond the Farthest Star.
No, it's the other way around.
The other way around.
It's the other way around. Yes.
So Far Beyond the Stars is the DS9.
Far Beyond the Stars. Yeah. Everybody who's seen that knows that the character he's playing, Benny Russell, experiences an emotional breakdown at the very end of the episode. Really intense. And they said that when they filmed that scene, that he remained in that state, that kind of broken, just shell of a man state after the scene ended. It was like they didn't know when to say cut because he was still in it. And it sounded like it was actually kind of I don't want to say awkward and make it feel like, oh, Avery Brooks made everybody feel weird, but no, it was just like he felt it so intensely. It's the climax of the episode, the emotional fulcrum of, like, in some ways, so much of Deep Space Nine. So yeah, I get that he felt it that way, but yeah, that is who he is. He's a guy who feels things on that almost operatic level, it seems like.
Yeah, and that was the episode that he directed. So it was the assistant director who was like, like the director's crying on the floor, like, I'm clearly gonna have to say cut at some point. Like, when they're talking to him, Lou something or other. I can't remember his name at the moment, but that AD, and he was like, yeah, I think he would have just stayed there like that for 30 minutes or so. Like if I hadn't finally said cut.
Yeah.
He also, because we don't get new interviews with Avery, but we get interviews with a bunch of other people. So we should talk about some of those interviews. But him, as an assistant director, he also told that story that they got contradicted by Max Grodenchek and Armin Shimmerman, but about when the Ferengi had their heads glued on the wrong actors. But,
right.
But then Armin said it didn't happen, and then Max said no. What it actually was our nose pieces got switched around.
Right. And that's one of a few dissenting stories in there. I'm trying to think. Did they have Andrew Robinson? They did have him kind of dramatize that at the beginning,
right?
With Garrick being kind of the show's ultimate liar and truth teller in his way.
Yes.
He says, "Hey, there's gonna be some disputed stuff in this." He's like, we did the best we could.
This is such a wonderful fucking documentary, because what other documentary in the world is based on something that where it's appropriate for Garrick to show up and explain that?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's so good. It's so fitting. It's so appropriate.
Yeah, like I said, it seemed to at times the documentary actually embodied the themes and struggles of the show, the like in fiction struggles. Um, so yeah, that was very cool. Father, before we like kind of dive into like a few specifics, uh, if somebody asked me what the structure of the documentary was, it does weave around a bit, and
Mhm.
one of the frameworks is the writers' room, where we see Ira Stephen Bear and what, maybe like 4 or 6 other
It
guys.
was Ron Moore, Renee Echeverria, or Echeverria, Hans Beimler, and Robert Hewitt Wolf.
Yeah, and they kind of break down what would be a hypothetical season 8, and got whiteboard and all that stuff, and they talk about it, and there's animatics of it and all that stuff. So that's one of the big things. They obviously talk to people about different episodes and weave it in other ways. But is there any other like obvious way to describe the structure of it? I mean, is there, or would you just say it's kind of organic?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty organic. It does kind of you get a pretty big information dump if you didn't know anything about like the production of that show. I think you would come out learning a lot. But yeah, it's also you kind of see the show from everyone's perspective. They talk to fans, they talk to writers, they talk to the stunt coordinator, they
Yep.
talk to the producer, they talk to one of the studio bigwigs or the studio exec
Right.
who
And
looks
I
like
guess
a
that
stereotype studio. It looks he's like a rich man in a mansion with a ascot and like his that goofy hair combed back. It's like, how
but
do you
yeah.
not look in the mirror and not realize you're a parody of yourself, bro?
Yeah, it's very well edited, but it does. Yeah, you mentioned the fan reactions, and that's something else that's woven in throughout. So, that they all do. There's, it's. I feel like when we were talking about Deep Space Nine and when we were reviewing it, I know I used the word organic a lot to describe. I,
Mhm.
I felt like how its plots would unveil themselves, and something for one episode would tip over a domino 7 episodes down the road, or 2 seasons down the road, or whatever. Like I was like, oh, they're calling that back out. Oh, they set that up. And like, so organic fits the documentary too. But yeah, let's dive into some stuff.
Well, out of the interviews, I guess like the new stuff. I guess one of the big standouts to me was Aaron Eisenberg, especially.
Hmm.
We lost him shortly after this came out after
Mm.
its release. The same with Renee, but yeah, I love seeing like some of those insights there.
He
From
seemed like he had something of what I think of as the Avery Brooks quality, in the sense of wearing his heart on his sleeve.
oh yeah,
Um, Aaron
totally.
Eisenberg. There's really this amazing scene where he talks about how playing against Avery Brooks when what is it, Nog was wanting to enter Starfleet, petitioning the
Hmm.
captain to help him or sponsor him,
Yeah,
and Cisco tries to really talk him out of it. He kind of gives him the tough love thing to see if he really means it. And it's a pretty harsh scene. You're like, damn, Cisco, ease down on this kid. But it's a good scene, and he talks about how Avery Brooks went like a little bit of extra mile, how much he gave you to react to as an actor, a fellow actor. And he talked about how he like physically put his hands on him, which would, I think, maybe not in the script, but like how it intensified and turned up the scene, and he had to keep from. Aaron Eisenberg, had to keep from breaking character and stay in the moment, and he
yeah.
wrestled it
He's like
in.
so
So
giddy. He's like so giddy and excited from how
yeah,
cool
I
this
mean, he
this
talked
acting
about it
moment
like
is.
it's there's this scene in the movie Broadcast News where an anchorman and the person who's giving him all the information behind the scenes, I guess the producer, uh, have this incredible rapport, and afterwards they're talking about it. It's like they haven't really worked that closely before, and afterwards they're talking about it, and he says it was like great sex, just because they bounced off of each other so well during this very live big news thing. uh, that's not how Aaron Eisenberg describes it, but that is the intensity of the scene where it's an actor saying, and I always hear this when you talk about somebody acting opposite Patrick Stewart or Ian McKellen or somebody like that, and it's just like they give you something to react to. They give you something to make you a better actor. And it was so clear that Eisenberg recognized that in Avery
Mhm.
Brooks, and his voice chokes up when he's talking about it. He's very emotional about it.
Yeah, and Aaron is an incredibly sweet dude. I'm so glad I got to see him in person. Um, yeah, really great guy. So I love his presence in this documentary. You definitely feel like he's in it a lot. Um,
Hmm.
what other? I guess like the other like standout for me is Mark Alimo, but I don't know if were there any to you want to bring up, or do you want to talk about the Alimo one?
Let's talk about that for a second. I'll skim my notes a little bit while we're talking.
He is an interesting dude. I've seen him at a convention one time. Um, but yeah, he's another guy. Like I remember, like he would get interviewed a lot. Like when DS9 was coming out, he would be in interviews in like Star Trek magazine and stuff like that. But there's a they talk about this in the doc. Iris, as at the time when DS9 was coming out, it seems like Gul Dukat was the most popular character. Nowadays, it seems like Garrick is the most popular character. It's interesting that these dubious Cardassians are so popular. Uh, but yeah, Alimo, he's a weird dude. He had like the recurring thing. It seemed, Ira even like reacts to it like, "Here we go," like he must have done this a lot. But when he's like, "I never felt like I was appreciated on that show. Never. Like I wish someone would have." But like Ira telling him, "The way writers tell you we like you is we keep giving you new episodes and we keep making your part bigger and more important. Like you should have known." But yeah, Mark Alimo is like no, he never he never got that. He's always, I guess, wanting either like the security or the satisfaction or
He seemed
whatever.
like he wanted someone to say, "Man, you owned that scene.
Yeah.
That was amazing."
Or maybe be
And
like, thanks for being part of the team. We couldn't have done it without you. Maybe he didn't feel like he was included as like the
yeah,
regulars. I
people.
don't know.
It's hard to know. It's not quite the love languages people talk about, but it's a little like that in the sense that people can be very different as to what motivates them. For all I know, they were withholding that because they knew it made him like a more intense and gave better performances or something. I don't think so, but it was interesting to watch him. I felt like he was almost like a kind of a quixotic character. He would be kind of pissed off and then immediately joking around like, oh, he's like, that's in the past or whatever. But then like it seemed like he was kind of still hurt by it. And it's true. Like his take on Ducat was amazing. He's one of the great Star Trek villains. Very good
Yeah.
case to be made for best.
Yeah, and there's a lot of big competition in that
Yeah.
arena. So,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
you do have to like you go to people like Khan, and it is kind of hard to compare because there's just he got obviously a ton more screen time, but what are you gonna take some oh god I still now I can't say the name of on Voyager the bad guys the bad Klingon knockoffs.
Kazon.
Yeah, some Kazon guy. Long standing recurring enemies. Star Trek has some colorful enemies, but not a lot of long recurring ones that have stood out. Not at that level. Q would be a case. You could make a case for him. Um,
Though I
but
think Gold Dukat might have the most appearances out of any.
almost would have to.
Yeah,
I don't know who
because
else could even come close.
Q would only show up, typically like once a season.
Right. He's
Gold.
got what like a dozen ish episodes to 12, 15 maybe. I don't know. Um, but yeah, it's not even a contest.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. But yeah, the fact that you were given that much screen time, they clearly did like you. But I could understand, like I just needed someone to say it to me. I can get that. A lot of people are kind of weirded out about some of the comments he makes in the documentary about how oh, I always wanted Ducat and Kira to get together. I think that would have been hot, and I know he wanted her because I wanted her back then. And then the
Yeah.
not visitors discussed about that, and it almost is like, wow, I was like, does she like not like Mark Alimo? Because there's that part where she accidentally says like, it could never be with Mark Alimo. I mean, it could never be with Ducat, and you're like, cut that out. But
Right, right. She Freudian slips it.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Because like I think I could see her being disgusted and just obviously it's a gross idea. Oh yeah, the commandant of the Nazi camps and the Jewish escapee falls for him. I'm like, yeah, that's gross. That's no matter how you slice
Yeah,
it, it was
that's why they gave it to Kai Wynn instead, because she deserved it.
yeah. Oh God. And she may have just literally just been a slip of the tongue to call out Mark like that. Father, I really liked seeing all the actors. I loved seeing Nana Visitor and Terry Farrell, Cirque Lofton. But another one of the ones that jumped out for me was seeing Renee. Is another lost to us, Renee
Mhm.
Auberjonois. Um, and it was there's no like not necessarily like one particular scene that I think was like, oh, this was like a super memorable moment with them, but it was just like his ability to kind of like have these heartfelt memories about so many scenes and moments in it, and just something about the way he carries himself. um but he joked, right, that he's like, of the role that it had become his iconic role, and he's like, at least now it won't say on my tombstone he was that guy from Benson or
Yeah,
something like
yeah, it
that.
won't say in my my eulogy in the newspapers, and I wouldn't, because
It's gonna say
uh
that too, though.
yes,
Or
yeah,
it
well,
probably
it
did.
did. It was like
Yeah.
it was all included. It was all there. They had all of it, and we watched this documentary together a couple days ago in my living room. But when we got to that part, I paused it and then turned to you and I said, "How freaking cool is that we got him, confessing to that being like his desire, his
Mm.
what something that he's grateful for
Yeah.
uh from the show." And it's like, how great is that, sad as it is that we lost him, that at least like we know that he will be remembered. Like now we are remembering him the way he
Mm.
was thankful. He knew he was going to get that, and he was
Yeah.
happy about it.
I always it always, like, in as much as I can relate to a celebrity who usually I haven't ever interacted with in any way, dying, I always kind of hope that they were someone who in their lifetime knew what their work meant to people. And I know we've had a few recently who I was like, okay, they knew. I think there are people like Mark Alimo, like there's any number of reasons, psychological reasons, self-esteem issues and stuff like that, that you may not even ever fully accept it, even if you think even if people tell you you're great all the time, you may not believe them. um uh but yeah, it seemed like he had a sense of it and was pretty happy with that. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, and that was kind of I guess the motivation of the documentary. Ira explains was that he titled it "What We Left Behind," referencing the final episode, what you leave behind. But he's talking about like how he wanted the actors to get like the validation that he think that they never received, that they always deserved. He talked about, at the beginning of the documentary, he says, actors go into acting to be loved, not to be disliked, not to be like, oh, they're not as good as TNG,
Right.
but yeah, and he felt like his actors were always kind of burdened with that, with that legacy, with that,
Hmm.
kind of tarnished name, and that, but I think just over the years, over the rise and popularity of DS9, and then like this documentary being like the final push. But he even says it's just in the journey of making this documentary, the actors, the cast, the crew, everybody, they kind of realized, they looked at each other during the documentary, and Iris says, they realized that, yeah, they were their own validations. Like they knew how good they were
Yeah.
all along.
I have this feeling, and that it gets brought up kind of a few times, that they simultaneously knew they were making something special and also were aware that it wasn't quite appreciated in the moment, and they didn't quite ever know if it was going to, or if it would, or that they if it was going to happen, it might take some time, which, who knows how long that would be in practice. What, I don't know, 10, 15 years, something like that, to really start seeing any change in how fandom received DS9, something like that. But yeah, they were very aware of it. In fact, who is it, Father? You have to remind me who it was. They do a couple funny things in it where they like read hate mail from the era.
Yes.
That's sprinkled throughout the whole thing, which that's so Deep Space Nine, the facing off against some people who hate you, and it's kind of doing it with some sly humor in this case.
It's also
But
funny because it just reminds people. It's like whenever there's new Star Trek, there's going to be people who bitch about it. It's just
right, well, so the scene that I'm thinking of in particular, one of the ones, is it Aaron Eisenberg? Somebody reads one that's particularly harsh,
that was
and they
Aaron,
and he like kind of like raises his eyebrows afterwards, and he's like, "Wow, that's harsh" or something. I think that's Iron Stephen Bear
right?
says he's like I don't know. He's like I kind of like it, and that might be a little bit of a difference between. I'm not an acting guy necessarily, but I think actors are probably a little bit more in need of validation, maybe than writers. I don't know. That they probably all creative types want it, but Ira seemed to have made his peace with it on more, and whereas you could kind of tell it maybe stung Aaron a little bit still to see that. But Ira was like, we were being provocateurs,
Yeah,
or like that's how he was
he
kind of
liked he
talking about
liked
it.
to provoke.
He liked to push
He's
buttons.
like, I know my shit is good. I know this is a good show, but
Right. And he wanted to get a reaction, and I think he knew that if some people were being pissed off, and this is true, that probably they were doing something right. That's not like some blanket always works, but like
in this
if
case, it does.
in this case it does. Yeah. Any I think one of the things I realized in watching this, is that Deep Space Nine really was the first Trek to sort of break that mold of format. Then
Hmm.
they read some people that are like lots of letters that were like Star Trek is about exploration, it's about brave, going to strange new worlds, and they're just sitting on a station. And but yeah, they forced fans to confront. Oh, what can Star Trek be? Arguably, Next Generation did a version of that. They're like, oh, it's not all going to be Kirk in Kirk fisticuffs. It's not gonna. They're gonna change the format,
But
but
it was still like, yeah, like the
it was
Enterprise
still within.
exploring space.
Right, it felt like it was more within the boundaries of what had been set
It,
down before.
it was
For
kind of like
maybe for
going
the
from
80s.
the cage to where no man has gone before. It's like, oh, it's the exact same concept with just like different people on the ship.
Mm.
You know,
But yeah, no, uh, I guess when it actually came out, I was one of those people it didn't work for, but I was off in Babylon 5 land, and I didn't even really give it a chance. So, I shame on me.
well, it's weird because I grew up watching Star Trek mainly by myself. No one in my immediate family, none of my friends are into it. I
Mhm.
never knew I was supposed to not like DS9 until it was too late, until like I already liked it.
Yeah.
But I remember like I did interact with people
That's
sometimes. Like
good, Father. That's good that you were out of the various echo chambers, I
but I
guess.
loved to read like the letter forums and Star Trek the magazine and
Mhm.
Star Trek Communicator, and I did
Father,
eventually
did
get
you
to
buy them or did you read them at grocery stores?
no, because the assholes put them in like that plastic bag where you have to buy it in order to
Yeah.
read it. But yeah, I'd get the subscription to those. That's what I did when I was 12 and had money from cutting people's grass. I'd
Mhm.
subscribe to Star Trek the magazine like a typical 12-year-old.
I was of course reading lots of comics in the era. Always liked the tradition, which for a while died out, but in recent years has come back, of letters pages. And
Mhm.
you would, even though yes, they were selectively edited, they didn't, they wanted to post stuff probably that mostly made them look good, but they would also, like in comics, they would post criticisms too, at least if they thought they could, it was a reasonable or that they had a good response to it. So did they do that in like Star Trek magazine?
Yeah, yeah, and I still have a lot of these magazines. I should go like bust them out and
Yeah, that'd
and
be fun.
read some of these. But there was like a lot of negative stuff said about DS9. It definitely was not as well liked as TNG or the original series. And when I did finally start going to conventions, I would talk to. I was always like the baby at conventions, and until recently, until like I guess like Discovery brought Star Trek back. I mean, part of that is I'm much older, but yeah, I always felt like I was so much younger than all the other Trekkies around me, and I felt like I got like judgment for like Well, like you think like DS9 is like good Star Trek. Like I guess you weren't around to appreciate, the original series and TNG when they were in their heyday, but so
Right now, that's what some of the new generation, I'm sure, are hearing about Discovery, Lower Decks, whatever
yeah.
series people are bitching about that day.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And yeah, it's just so much of history repeating itself. And Ron Moore will tell you all of this has happened before and will happen again. But uh, uh, the fact that we've just turned such like a 180 degree on DS9 as a fandom, and now it's just kind of universally accepted. Like DS9 might not be everyone's favorite, but most people would agree it's the best. Not
Right.
everyone, but most.
Right. There's a level of craft to the writing, character arcs, things like that. That's as close as I can say to being pretty objectively true in when you're dealing
Uh,
with something so broadly
and
subjective
and not
as
that
fiction.
not that everything needs to be ranked and compared, and it's
Yeah.
we don't want to like force the Star Trek shows to match up against each other like in some showdown. We're all one big happy fleet, as Khan would say. But it's just
That's the Khan's cynical spin on that is kind of accurate in this. After all, um, but yeah, they've got to be their own. Every once in a while, I hear somebody talking about like, oh, why Picard is so clearly the intellectual elite, and that he was the best of the captains, dispassionate and all this, and I was like, he's great in his stories, but it still is going to come down to preferences. I hear people talk, oh, Cisco clocked Q. He didn't take shit. He played by his own rules. Yeah, that's great. It's perfect for his show. It does not mean he's better than Janeway. you know. But does he resonate with you more? I think like that's the more interesting conversation to have. I kind of wish people would say like, oh, why does Picard click for me so well? What is it about him? With Cisco, I can say like I think he probably got some of the best dialogue. He got some really meaty roles in a way that some of the others didn't. But yeah, I can get frustrated when people kind of start doing those rankings as if it's obvious.
uh I don't. I guess some of the other interviews, I guess, in the documentary, other than the actors, they do talk to Rick Berman shows up in there a little bit, and which is a little awkward, a little tense when they kind of get into like Terry Farrell's dispute, and then we hear like Rick Berman talk about it a little bit.
hmm
I don't think the documentary doesn't go into as much detail that is out there, but it definitely sounds like Rick Berman was the asshole. We talked about this when we were discussing season 6 and 7 of DS9. People can go check out those episodes. But yeah, basically, Rick Berman. When Terry Farrell said, "I at least want to have a conversation about can I possibly get like a pay bump or something, like at least like have a meeting with me," and Rick Berman was like, "You should just be happy to have a job. If it wasn't for me, you'd be working at Kmart." And went on to, according to Terry, he went on to say like, like your chest is so flat, like you're not even hot enough to be on TV. Like my secretary has bigger tits than you. We should put her on the show instead of you. Like really, really intense stuff. But she said this like multiple times, like that's how it went down. And they don't quite, go into that. I think they were trying to be respectful to Berman, but
Right. They walk a pretty good line of letting them say their part, and the truth of the matter is that if one of them, even though Terry is the more likely to be accurate one, I think, um, if she had been allowed to relate those stories in full in this, then Berman almost certainly wouldn't have been in it, and vice versa. If he was given more time, instead they kind of approach it like, yeah, we had some sticking points. Here's one of them. And like Terry, when she's talking about it, she also gets emotional. Her voice is breaking. Like you can see, this is not it's not handled frivolously in the documentary. So I appreciated that.
oh, we should also say that Adam Nimoy was originally he was going to be the director of this documentary. He was working with Ira in the early stages. He had to eventually leave for other commitments. But this is around the time that him and Terry Farrell got married.
Uh,
When they've since been divorced.
yep.
but I think they might have met through this documentary. So that's another thing that I seems like she did not have a good time with that marriage. So sorry that she had to go through more hardship with this.
It's
But
too bad. Yeah, just as kind of Trek royalty, I had sort of hoped that one would work out, but you know, it happens.
um, well,
So,
if we're
Father, you were sorry. You were mentioning some of the production people. Um, they did talk about some of the. I don't know if I'm going to immediately recall any anecdotes, but like some of the guys, like the stunt coordinator, or
oh
uh,
yeah, the dude with like long hair looks like he like is about to go to a Poison concert or something.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm trying to think. Did he have any like? It doesn't jump out as much for me because that's less my scene than seeing what the actors are up to or the writers.
Well,
But
here's a cool thing. We watched this on the Blu-ray. My backers, it says backers edition on it, and it's
hmm
cool. It makes me feel like all important. But
hmm
uh, the cool thing about the Blu-ray is they have additional interviews that they cut out of the final documentary. But
hmm
there's some fun nuggets that I showed a lot of them to Dave, and yeah, there's some stuff that he talks about in there. I guess the big one was telling the story of the last scene together. We talked about this a little bit when we were discussing DS9 season 7, but Avery Brooks punching Mark Alimo on accident in their final scene together. I
Yep.
actually landed it one right on his face. And there's like this debate of like Avery said Mark Alimo leaned into it, and he says like no, like Avery was off his mark. Standing too close to me. In other words,
The suggestion being that he might have done it on purpose.
yeah.
And
Well,
we don't know anything about their interactions. Like, oh, did they have any long simmering thing? Was this in fact some final fu to him to like over something? I don't know. but
yeah.
but yeah, it's one of those things you're gonna like. People are gonna remember that.
Another funny one. I don't think we should go into detail. If you're really curious, just go check out the Blu-ray. But Sirach Lofton talks about growing up in that the Jake Sisko wardrobe and some unfortunate wardrobe events that occurred.
Right. They
That
he apparently the not breaking point, but the point. Well, no, it was a breaking point. Was I think TV Guide did a like best and worst dressed on TV, and Jake made a worst dressed like top 10 list, and of course they show him in like one of those kind of like trashy loud shirts or
yeah.
ensembles, jumpsuits or whatever of season one or
Yeah,
two, and
Berman era Star Trek was terrible at civilian clothes. It just
yeah.
was. It was great
Uh,
at many things, but terrible at that one.
um, the uh did he talked to what wardrobe and they like updated it, started giving him moving away from the jumpsuits, I think they said, and more to like you know
Yeah, like jackets and vests and
yeah,
stuff.
jackets and vests, better sort of slightly more layered, I think, looks. um I see in the
Uh,
comments Jill says she got the sense that the cast didn't like Mark Alemo. um it does seem like most of his clips were him alone, right? They didn't too often have him
there's
in
the
scenes.
there's that time where they're in like a hotel suite in Vegas and it's
Mm,
like a group of people but then most of it is just yeah, him by himself. So it looks like
yeah,
those are the only two things that he participated in.
and um, and then yeah, and then notably, there's that Freudian slip seemingly from Nana, where where she name checks him as being like kind of disgusted with the possibility of a relationship with him.
Mhm.
But yeah, if nothing else, he clearly is. He seems like a sort of intense personality, and I kind of think Jill might be right on that. I don't know the
As
exact dynamics of it, but I think
as different as like Avery Brooks is from Cisco, Mark Alimo is kind of like that with Ducat. It's like, there's still like some like when you were saying like my favorite mission was raising Jake. That's kind of very Cisco. Like every now and then you see like something like that shine through, but
mhm,
for the most part, yeah, his mannerisms, his speech, his like the way he speaks, it's very very different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's almost Gold Dukat has like a unique look. You know, he's a a tall dude, has like a very famously long neck that
Mm-hmm.
inspired the design of the Cardassian neck ridges, because he was also the original Cardassian in Next
Right.
Generation before he was Dukat. Uh, so he you know, he's recognizable as Dukat, yet so different when he's out of character.
Yeah, it's true. It doesn't seem like he has that sort of sophistication necessarily
But
that
he can
Dukat
play it,
does. But he
which is
can play it, so
interesting.
it's obviously it is something in him. That's one of
Right.
the kind of cool things about seeing a documentary like this is sort of seeing how multi-layered sort of people are. So that yeah, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's the like when you're watching him, you're almost like, no, that's not the guy who played Dukat, and then you're like, oh, but clearly it's within him.
Well, let's talk about the I guess like the other cool things that are on the Blu-ray that you might
Hmm.
not have seen if you were watching this some other way, is they have that that kind of like abridged little history of DS9, just talking about like you know, this is the TNG spinoff that came out in 1993 and blah 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 blah. And then they have this actual professor like doing it, and then you have the student in the classroom like asking questions as Jonathan Frakes. So there's a Jonathan Frakes cameo in a deleted scene of this
Yeah.
documentary.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Father. They should have left it in.
Yeah,
It's
it's only
pretty
like
good.
4 minutes long, but yes, it's
If I
there's
was
a
gonna,
really funny joke in there where the professor says something about Worf, and Jonathan Frakes is like, "Who?" Yeah, like Worf. Or, no. He says Michael. He's like, Michael Dorn joined the cast in season 4, and Jonathan Frakes is like, "Who?" And the professor like, Michael Dorn, and Jonathan Frakes is like, "Huh?" It's like, doesn't ring a bell. And he's finally like, Worf, and Jonathan Frakes is like, oh yeah, that guy.
yeah,
It's just kind of a joke. That's a TNG type of ball busting move between
yeah.
those TNG actors. So it's cool. It's cool to see like a little like TNG energy in this
Mm,
DS9 documentary, or on the
yeah.
deleted scene to it.
I will say that occasionally some of the slightly goofy, I'm going to call them sketch-like elements of the framing device, mostly with Ira Stephen Bear, were a little hokey. you know, just the sort of like they've got like a quasi script leading into a segment, or they're interacting with a mock computer
Yeah.
screen or whatever.
Andy Robinson calls them in the middle of the documentary.
Right, and like
It's like it's time for the space battle.
right, but it's still like I overall I think it's really good, but just every once in a while I was like, all right, you're not an actor, right? All right, bro.
I think he knows that.
I
The
actually loved at the end. If we could real quick cut to this comment over the credits, is it Terry or is it who is it who comes out and interrupts him?
it was Nana and Ira.
No, no.
Yeah.
Interrupts him during as the credits are scrolling by him or whatever. And what is he? I don't remember. He must be saying like a sort of a farewell or a thanks or something. And she starts
Hmm.
kind of echoing what they know the fan criticisms will be, and saying like, "Wait, you did this whole 2-hour documentary and that you didn't cover uh, uh, tribbles, trials and tribulations, and you didn't cover this or you didn't cover that."
Yeah.
And he's like, we had to make it fit. Some things had to go. But I really like that scene because it's such a perfect encapsulation of what I'm sure many people's reactions were. Like, how did you not cover this one particular episode in your encapsulation of 7 seasons?
Yeah.
And
So
that was clearly like that was a sketch too. That was them,
sure, that was a good one though.
scripted or quasi scripted, and yeah, it was good. And it does lead up. I'm not going to spoil it because it's too fun. It does lead up to a very funny joke too,
Yeah, this is a very cool like a special moment they save for the post credit thing. So, uh,
described as the great one of the greatest moments,
greatest
or the
moment.
greatest moment in all of Star Trek.
I think it was in all of DS9, but
Okay.
it might as well be all of Star Trek. Why not? Uh, the thing we haven't brought up yet is I think is the remastered footage. They because they were able to raise so much money for this documentary, they're like, well, what else can we throw in here? And they're like, what if we take some of the footage we were already going to try to get, you know, footage from Paramount to put in our documentary?
Mm,
What if we convert it to HD so, you know, it looks good in movie theaters and modern TVs and stuff? And it does look pretty damn good. DS9 holds up in HD. I've heard so much talk over the years, like, oh, like the Cardassian and Ferengi makeup probably looks like shit in HD. Like, no, sir, it does not. It looks good. It looks as good as like anything I see coming out on modern TV in 2023.
Father, when you saw it in the theater when it was released, did it pop on screen
Yeah.
that it was HD for you and all that?
Yeah. No, it looked like it belonged on it. It was worthy of that big screen that it was on.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's very cool. It must have been nice to them for once have the problem of what do we do with all this money that we got
Yeah.
for the documentary? That's I'm sure very few shows, if you're not a Game of Thrones or something, or Rings of Power or whatever, have the problem of so much money going around.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it must be nice, but that's
And even then, it's like that's within the range of documentary money. That's not like massive production, but still, it's
no,
cool that
yeah,
they
we're,
had
we're
something.
we're talking about $500,000. Like that's like a whole lot of money. It's like, well, yeah, you can't even make an episode of Star Trek uh, for it's gonna be several million, not 500,000.
That's barely a quarter of the budget of showing was it the turbo lift interiors in an episode of Discovery.
It, in our live audience, Joel is saying, "May the prophets bring us the HD." And I think eventually there will be some type of official release of DS9 in HD when the AI upscaling technology gets good enough.
Mm.
The process they use for this documentary is a pretty like painstaking process. It's what they did with the TNG Blu-rays that only like me and like 9 other people bought. So they're never going to do that with DS9 or Voyager. They just lost too much money. But eventually the AI upscaling will get us there. It's not we're not quite ready. They did that with Babylon 5. You can watch that on HBO Max. It looks good, but not good enough for Star Trek in my opinion. Just be patient. We'll get it.
Yeah, that'll bring when it happens, Father. Maybe it'll be another DS9 reappraisal, another opportunity for a revival of interest in it.
Yeah, another cool thing in here, I guess that we didn't mention is that in addition to all the people who worked on the show that they interview, they occasionally talk to fans at conventions. They
Mm.
went to Vegas, and it made me excited for Vegas coming up in August, being back in the Rio. Because here I'm seeing all this. It's like, oh yeah, I've been there, and these are the people that I see there every year and stuff like that. So, but yeah, they have Mark Bernardin, Kevin Smith's buddy. If anyone knows
Yeah.
the Fat Man Beyond podcast,
Mm.
but Mark Bernardin, as a TV writer, he said something really cool, and very well worded, like you'd expect from a writer. But he said, DS9 does not get enough credit for all the things it did as early as it did them and as well as it was doing them.
I don't know. Is he the one? This comes up throughout the several times throughout the documentary, but I know that there was some soreness. I think this is also talking to some of the writers about what they did, which was at the time a hugely progressive and forward thinking depiction of like black familial relationships, father son, father
Mm-hmm.
grandfather, or his father and father, his dad, but and they talked about how in one of those retrospectives of like, oh, some of the shows that were pushing things forward in the 90s on like I don't remember if it was CNN or MTV or whatever, but it was
The CNN documentary of the '90s.
right. And they were talking about what shows had people of color on them and extended scenes with multiple people of color in them, like where there might not be any white character in it. And as they're talking about it, they were kind of pissed that Deep Space Nine had been left off the list. And of
Yeah,
course, they're showing scenes with Jake and Cassidy and Cisco all talking, or Cisco and his dad. They so many scenes throughout the whole show that were just kind of casually very very progressive for the time.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I think Mark might. I mean, and he as a black guy, I'm sure he's more aware of that than we are. Yeah, he might have been talking about that. I think he was also talking about just as like a TV writer. It was
Hmm.
very advanced and like a serious prime time syndication or yeah, like direct to syndication TV shows. Like did not do serialization. And DS9
Right.
was a little groundbreaking by like having continuity, episodes that remember what happened in previous episodes was
Hmm.
still like even in the 90s was still a little, it was a little rare.
Yeah, there were. It was becoming starting to become more common as X Files,
Yeah,
Babylon
which was at the
5,
same time, like
and
these shows
even
premiered at the same time.
Twin Peaks. Famously, I get that might have been what late '80s technically, or was it 1990? But that was starting to get the ball rolling. But yeah, it was not the comfortable, familiar thing yet. There was still like episodic was still probably the most understood format.
What the funny thing is that you and me watching it now, as I guess guys that are kind of even before serialized Star Trek with Discovery and Picard, we were a little kind of burnt out on serialized TV and like
Hmm.
this modern quote unquote golden age of TV. But yeah, we kind of like DS9 now because it's more episodic. But the groundbreaking thing at the time was that it was more serialized.
Right, right. I think it's very artfully serialized. I like how they'll do a couple standalone episodes, a two-parter, a couple standalones, a three-parter, and yet they all still like sometimes those. One of my coworkers is going through just getting rolling on Deep Space Nine right now. He's somewhere in season two, and there's an episode that was I think was it the one where there was like was there a colony where they were all like holograms or something?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think I don't. I might be confusing episodes, but it's a solid episode, not like an amazing one, but a solid episode. And my coworkers said that but they mentioned something in that one about the Dominion casually, like it comes up, and this is before we know much at all about the Gamma Quadrant and the Dominion, and that little extra oomph made him like, what's this Dominion? I don't. He kind of just knows casually a little bit about it,
Hmm.
but not much, and it's that kind of neat stuff. It's like was that an episodic episode? 100%. But was that also a serial type element? Laying the trail for the eventual reveal of the Dominion, also 100%. So
Yeah. Well, we love that hybrid format is something
yeah,
we've always talked about. And
yep. One of the things that I am really excited to see again when Strange New Worlds hits.
yes, which we'll be talking about very soon in
Hmm.
what, 4 weeks, I
Yeah.
believe, or
Yeah.
something like that. June 15th. Um, I was gonna say something about speaking of watching it with your coworker, but we should probably save that for how we end. So I'm gonna put a pin in that. But yeah,
Okay.
help me remember to circle back to that. But
Okay.
before we close down, we need to talk about the season 8 writers' room. That was something that
Yeah.
going into the documentary, I knew that they were doing. Ira talked about like, oh yeah, like we're gonna we're all gonna get together for a whole day and order Chinese food and hammer out what we would do if we were going to write season 8. And I was so excited. I was like, oh, this is so cool. This might be the closest thing I get to like a real like DS9 continuation. I would love to hear what idea they cook up. We should go into detail about what that is, but just I actually like I like most of what they came up with. There's a few things that are kind of like I don't know about that, but like overall, I think that's pretty neat. I'd be excited for it. What did you think?
I was pretty happy with it. Like you, there was a few things that I was like, I would maybe need the convincing of some episodes with it to make it work. But like in the same way, I was like, I don't know about this Odo Kira thing. I'm having a tough time buying it. And then I got to see Vic Fontaine kind of facilitate that and see it develop. And then I was like, okay, all right, okay, I'm with it. I think I would have needed that. I need some stuff, but uh, overall, I was pretty happy with it. I thought what they described was a really strong kickoff episode. You can tell Ron Moore's was in that, right?
Yes.
And he was pretty prominent. His flair for drama really comes through in that, and he's like, what is it? We see a ship and it's being chased by Romulan warbirds or whatever, and then we see it's captained by Nog, right?
Yeah. It was
Yeah,
chased by a cloaked ship. Like we
a
don't
cloaked
know who,
ship, right?
a cloaked ship that can fire when cloaked. We don't know who it
Yeah.
is.
And it's kind of exciting to see this and kind of imagine that writer's room during some of the episodes that are like some of the biggest episodes. Like, I want to see him breaking down soldiers of the empire or something like that. That must have been something to see that energy, because
Mm.
they capture, I think, something of it here. Um, but yeah, the like one of the things it kicks off with that I was like, I don't know, I got to think about this, was Kira as Vedic. Um, and I don't remember if they said, was she stationed on DS9? Was she
Yeah,
still
she's
commanding it?
DS9 has become like a spiritual temple. Like I guess it's like
A
the
Mecca. They specifically, yeah, and I did like that idea of like, oh yeah, it's literally
the
the home of the
there's
emissary.
statues of the emissary on the promenade. And
Yep.
yeah, it's and, yeah,
And
and she's a
they show
Vedic.
some cool artwork and animatics of all that stuff. And like, honestly, even just seeing the artist's depiction of it, I was like, that's pretty good. I know this is kind of like rough sketches, but they're sketches that had like color and
Good
solidly
likenesses.
yeah, I was going to say captured the likenesses of the actors. I thought, even sometimes like imagining them with a few year, decade or so of age, maybe
I don't
a
know if
decade
you
or two.
noticed, but they drew Joseph Sisko, like Sisko's other son. They named him after his dad, after
Hmm.
Brock Peters' character, but they even drew him to look a lot like Brock Peters. So it's like,
Oh,
what
I didn't quite
what if
catch
he
that.
looked
That's
like his
cool.
grandpa? Yeah, so I thought that was
Yeah,
a cool little
like,
detail.
yeah, like a suggestion of the kind of casting they might have pursued for that. That's
Yeah, but
cool.
I thought it was good use of, the world building of the Star Trek universe. They're gonna have like, Martok sends Worf back to the station for, we got to find out what's going on with the Bajorans. There's, cool like post Dominion War stuff with the Jem'Hadar, cool Section 31 stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, I I guess we can spoil it here if we're
I
we're
think
we're
it's
about done talking. So if you don't want to hear
right.
it, you can probably just bounce now. But
And we're gonna miss some neat little details along that are there along the way anyway. So you, if you saw it, you'd still get some cool little side bits and stories, and seeing him break it down is its own reward. But yeah, like, what all else occurs in this?
yeah, so basically the story would be Nog gets like the band back together. He has his uncle Quark send everyone a message, all the DS9 characters basically, Bashir, Ezri, O'Brien, saying, you have to come back to Deep Space Nine because Vic Fontaine is dying. So
Hmm.
everyone, stops what they're doing. As Ezri and Bashir are married, and she's a captain of her own ship, the Emmett Till, and so they come to the station. O'Brien's still like a teacher on Earth, and he goes. Uh, Quark is still there. Kira's still there. Molly is there as, I guess, like an engineer. Like she's in Starfleet now. Molly O'Brien has grown up in Starfleet. Joseph Sisko is a science officer on the station. Jake he became a writer. He's living in New Orleans, and
Hmm.
he's actually like having like these visions from the prophets, which turns out to be Sisko communicating with them. And they all go to the back to the station, and they find out, oh, Vic Fontaine is not dying. In fact, Nog needed them there for some other reason. And then Nog shows up on the Defiant and is destroyed, blown up, killed
Yep.
by, it turns out, by Section 31, who is secretly trying to destroy the Bajoran religion, to help bring Bajor into the Federation. Meanwhile, Kira is secretly building her own army to defend Bajor, because the Jem'Hadar, post the Dominion War, they're no longer worshiping the founders, and they're bred to be basically like holy warriors. They're bred to go on a holy war.
Hmm.
So the Bajorans just start converting them. They just start they send Bajoran missionaries at the Gamma Quadrant, I guess, and they come back with an army for Bajor.
It's an ingenious idea. Honestly, that part
Yeah.
is really, like, it's so big, and like, I hate, the last thing I would want is to see Kira go go Paul
Like,
Muad'Dib on
yeah,
this
or like you could like
inadvertently.
Maxwell Lord her, like if you read DC comics, like
Right.
when they
But
turn someone into an irredeemable villain.
right, and I don't think that they would. I have to kind of imagine them executing it with the skill that they brought to the table before, which is to say, well, that's the starting off point of the season, and where will it go? That's what we've yet to see. Obviously, the killing Nog was that's one of those kind of kill your darlings kind of writer things that I was not wild about.
Neither was Aaron Eisenberg, who
I bet,
comically plays that up,
yeah.
but
But you know, again, this is a writer's room. This is breaking it down. There should be nothing off limits. And in the day that they had to play around with this, that was one of the dramatic things that they chose. And like it's if nothing else, it's dramatic, and
yeah,
I can see it. I've seen, by the way, from was Ron Moore the guy who specifically said that? I think
said what?
Nog dies.
No, it was Ira. He said
It
like
was okay.
when he was driving over the whole time, he said he was thinking that it was going to be O'Brien. O'Brien would die. And
Yeah.
then by the time he got out of his car, he's like, "Nah, it needs to be Nog."
It's messed up. But I guess I was gonna say with Ron Moore, I've seen him make both really strong choices as far as like character deaths and dramatic turns and stuff where I'm like, no, that was dumb. you know? So right at the moment, I guess I would say that's the only part that bothered me really. All the other stuff I felt had some promise. And also even the way they described it, I'm not even 100% sure that would have had to have been his death. Yes, the Defiant explodes. Did he
It's like
definitely die?
if I can talk about Star Trek Picard season 3. If you
Hmm.
don't want to hear it, skip forward 10 seconds. But did Ro die in Picard? She could have beamed out or something.
Right. I think she did for it because it's a
I do too.
dramatic
But
finale, but
you could, it wouldn't feel
could you
like
get
too
her
big of
out?
a cheat if you retconned that. It was like, no, she
Right.
she beamed off at the last minute.
But I liked all the where the characters are things. I liked that they were going because they returned because they heard Vic was dying, and it's Ira or Ron Moore, I believe, who talks about how they kind of like laughed for like somebody I think in the writers' room chuckles a little bit at that, and then I think it's Ron Moore who's like he's like, but no, he's like I actually think it's this is like an important thing. It shows you how much that character had come to mean to them, that a hologram
Mm.
could have those kind of roots with people that and like he even I think imitates he's like but then they're talking to him and he's like, hey Pally, I'm doing all right or whatever. And I love it, like it did feel like that all felt like something I could absolutely see playing out. um Kira's Vedic Nog dying.
Oh, I guess
I'd
the
have to
other
think
the
about.
other twist was that Bashir would actually, he's married to Ezri, but he's secretly in Section 31. So it would be like Kira would be like a bad guy, and Bashir would also be a bad guy.
Right, that Bashir one was another iffy point. I'm like, I I don't need everyone to get the full a full happy ending. Their life doesn't have to be in a perfect state. I don't want them. I've spent too much time with those characters to see them become villains, and I don't think that necessarily Kira had to be going in that direction. So much as like, okay, she was making sure that Bajor would be defended, maybe beyond her lifespan. That it would, she could set. She was trying to set up something that would last, and but Bashir, running Section 31, that'd be a tough pill to swallow. That's a little bit more of that Ron Moore. Well, I'm like, well, it's dramatic, Ron, but I don't know if it's good. But anyway, it's also just fun watching these guys hash it out, argue with each other a little bit, springboard off of somebody else's idea, writer room stuff.
Yeah, very much had a good time watching that. Those guys are all like picketing right now, so
Yep.
good luck to them.
Father,
Yeah.
this is just a minor thing, but the show also, among its in the documentary, kind of like I guess you'd say kind of sillier moments, but also fun, is they let some of the characters like do some singing and stuff like that. There's
Oh,
like
this yeah. Well,
there's an
those
original song written and some guys with some pretty good voices busted out, like what you call it, Vic Fontaine style.
Yeah, they have like the end of the line, like the end of Deep Space Nine song, like the Star Trek Rat Pack does that. They performed on the cruise this year, but they're at Vegas every year. Because it's like
Who all is in that?
Max Grodenchik writes the lyrics. He's always kind of like the lead dude in it. But other DS9 people is Casey Biggs, and Armin Shimmerman sometimes, and then visitors actually last time in Vegas. And who else did they? Oh, I said Casey Biggs. Casey Biggs is in the documentary,
Mhm.
but they bring in people from like other shows too. They've Vaughn Armstrong is normally a big part. Ethan Phillips, Robert Picardo, I think might have
Mhm.
popped up in there at one point or
That's
another.
fun.
So, but yeah, like they're a lot of fun to see. It was funny, like on the cruise, I went to the Rat Pack show, and then after it, like, it was in the elevator with Vaughn Armstrong or Admiral Forrest from Enterprise. He's
Mhm.
played the most characters out of anyone. It's I think 11 total characters, including 2 Cardassians on DS9. But I was on the elevator with him and with Ethan Phillips. They're both getting on up there in age these days. They're
Mhm.
in like their tuxedos. They're just like covered in sweat, and they're just like, "Oh my god, I'm like so tired." They're just like, we both got to go to bed. We're too old. There, we basically did that show 3 times. We did like the rehearsal, then we do like the early show, then we do the late show. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, like that's like we're done. We're spent. We got to go pass out. And I was like, well, y'all have a good night. um,
Yeah. I get it. I get it. You know, sometimes I watch some TV and I'm tired.
but yeah, there's a lot of fun. It's a very delightful documentary. I think it has a
Mhm.
bunch of different things going on. So things feel fresh. It's like, oh, like they're singing. Oh, look, here's like the animated 8th season. Oh, look, here's like a interview. Here's look at like this great space battle in HD. So yeah,
Mm.
it's a
Yeah,
lot
they
of cool
showed
stuff.
what I think Father, I think I messaged you. I actually forget what episode this battle is in, but I messaged you. I remember in the middle of the night or whatever because I was
Hmm.
like, man, that
Sacrifice of Angels.
yeah, that scene with the Klingon backup arriving is the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
As is just so cool, and I was glad they showed like probably a full 30 seconds or minute long of that sequence. That was really dope.
Yeah. So we're happy with, I guess, like my final thing that I wanted to close with, that I said we'd circle back to, is
Hmm.
just like Deep Space Nine as a show. I If I had to say like I had a favorite TV show, because I'd want to say like all of Star Trek, it's all my favorite. But if I had to pick like one individual show, it would without a doubt be Deep Space Nine. It's a show that like I've never like really tried to force on a ton of people, but just some people like close to me in my life, it seems like the show like spreads to them. Like I've had roommates that I've shown the show to. I've had best friends I've shown the show to. I've had a tremendous experience sharing the show with you, Dave, and revisiting it and talking about it with our audience. And
Right, and now I'm carrying on that tradition. I've
yeah,
got literally both of my two of my coworkers right now. One on season 7, one on season 2. Both of them are having a great time with it, and that's here's a show that's what are we 20 years past its
it turned 30 years this year. This is its
shit.
30th anniversary.
That's wild, and
So
that
it is as old as the original series was when they went back in time to the original series.
um, but yeah, it's just it is a testament to it that it could grab some new fans. And by the way, both of my friends are Trek friendly. Grew up watching some, not the biggest Trek viewers. Watch some new stuff, don't watch some new stuff. So the fact that Deep Space Nine is looks like it's holding their interest, pretty notable.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. That's really special. If the documentary is called "What We Left Behind" and the final episode is called "What You Leave Behind," I feel like we should call like this podcast "What Y'all Left Behind" as a testament to all those talented, wonderful people who gave us this show. That yeah, we're continuing to enjoy and show to new people, and letting them be part of that enjoyment as well.
Hmm. I like that. I like that. Our little spin, our Texan spin on it.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. Uh, we will call it a night on that note. However, we will make our return next week. Same Tex-Trek time, same Tex-Trek channel. If you want to catch us live on YouTube, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central, or listen to us later wherever you get your podcast. I don't know what we're talking about next week. I have a few ideas. We might try to get a guest. It just depends on who is willing to show up and has time to do so. But yeah, we'll try to come up with something fun for y'all. And just thank you again, everyone, for not forgetting us while we were gone for 2 weeks. I was kind of nervous to go on break. Thanks to, if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, you would have seen some fun stuff with Aaron and Rachel, just to have something going on Fridays. But yeah,
I think they talked both about merchandising and food in Star
yes.
Trek.
So they did a Prodigy toy, because the Prodigy toys are out now. The Playmates action figures. They did a Prodigy toy unboxing, and then they cooked some Star Trek recipes and went through like some old Star Trek cookbooks over the years. So if people want to see, if y'all want to see like more stuff like that, like more like, we do like this weekly podcast, but if y'all want to see like more kind of unique things, or maybe like other people on, let me know if anyone has like ideas, or if they want to, if y'all want to see us talk about Star Trek comics, like I was talking about earlier, we can do other things on the YouTube channel.
Message or tweet us or what have you.
Yeah. And just thank you all for not only coming back, but the people who are able to help out with super chats on YouTube. If you're giving in the Patreon each month, it's allowed us to make like some changes to the show. So hopefully, if people are watching this or listening to this, like it should be like a little bit better picture quality. You might see, if you're watching this somewhere, the Starship Texas has gone through like a bit of a refit. I might, there might be like a few hiccups in the next few weeks. We might be trying to iron out some things here. We're on shakedown cruise, right? We got the refit, but we gotta shake it down. We gotta be in ship shape by June 15th when Strange New Worlds is here, right? We gotta look good then. So but yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. We have some fun things planned in the build up to the return of Strange New Worlds.
Right, starting with tomorrow's Voyager Patreon viewing.
Yeah, so be sure to join us there if you're catching us live on Friday. That's going to happen tomorrow, 3:30 p.m. Central. Everyone else, we'll see you next week. And until then, as always, live long and prosper, y'all. Oh, I took 2 weeks off and now I forgot how to close this out. Okay, sorry about that. Live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek, and follow Fathery on Twitter at TXTrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.